Hello everyone, it is Jazz here, and I am here with my August monthly recommendations video. Monthly Recommendations is a Goodreads group which was started by Kayla at Kayla Rain and Trina at Between Chapters, and I have left the link to the group in the description. What they do is they have a theme for each month and we recommend books within that theme, and in August it's a very special month because it's their 1-year anniversary for the group. So for this month we are supposed to recommend one book for each of the themes that they've done over the year. So let's jump right in. The first theme we're recommending for is an underrated book, and I really thought this over and decided to recommend Valley of the Dolls by Jacqueline Susann. This book takes place, I think, starting from the 1940s into the 1960s, and it is about 3 women who moved to New York, and they all, through different sorts of avenues, end up getting involved in fame or in the entertainment industry, and this affects their lives not always in the most positive way. So it's about fame and addiction and how it kind of affects these people. So it's maybe not the happiest book, which is probably one reason why it's an underrated book, but also I feel like a lot of people think this book is trashy. I didn't think the book was trashy. I really enjoyed it. I thought it had like a lot of interesting characters and a lot of psychological thoughts in it, but maybe it was just me. Next, we are supposed to pick a book that is set in school, and I decided to go with Speak by Laurie Hulse Anderson. Speak is a YA book about a girl named Melinda. Over the summer, her and her friends attend a party, and something really bad happens at this party to her, and so she calls the police on the party, and thus everybody, when she starts high school, because she's a freshman in high school, kind of hates her guts because they don't understand why she did that, and she looks like a total crazy person, and also because of these things that she's going through, she is very quiet and very not inclined to speak. There is a lot going on at school in this book, so that's why I chose this book. I really love this book. I love how Laurie Hulse Anderson writes. She has really beautiful imagery when she writes. If you're looking for something deep and emotional, definitely check out Speak. Then we're supposed to pick a creepy book, and I decided to go with a book that I read recently, and it is House by Ted Dekker and Frank Peretti. This book is about 2 couples that get stranded in this house, and there are 2 problems. Number 1, there is a serial killer outside the house, and they are locked inside the house because the house is also haunted or has some supernatural things going on in it. And insanity basically ensues just because these 2 couples obviously have their own issues with each other, and also the added issue of the craziness that's going on in the house. It's action-packed. It's not terrifying if you're not super into horror, but it is creepy because it's a suspense book with a supernatural element. You can find this book in the Christian fiction section, but I think everybody can read this. If you want to give a creepy book a try, but you don't want it to be too terribly terrifying, this is probably a book that you want to pick up. Next, it is our job to recommend a trilogy to read. I decided to stick with my recommendation that I always recommend when I'm asked about trilogies and book tags and everything, and you're probably all sick of it if you followed me for a long time, but I'm just gonna go ahead and recommend the Legends of Mirwood trilogy by Jeff Wheeler because I love it so much. This series is about a girl named Leah, and she is, as a very young baby, left at a monastery, and she's basically an orphan. And in this fantasy world, it's really important where you come from, what your background is and your lineage. Because she doesn't have any lineage, she is basically a wretched, and that means she has to basically live in servitude to the people that she was left with at this kind of monastery-ish like place or what are the equivalent of that. And she thinks she's gonna live like that forever, just being like a cook's assistant. But one day a squire is injured and he shows up in her home, and she decides, because someone really not very nice is after him, to help him and hide him, and they have to go on an adventure and kind of run away so that he can escape. And then multitudes of adventure ensue. What I really like about this series is that it does take place from the time Leah is 13 until the time that she's an adult, so you get to see her full character arc. And also, I love the world building in this. It's just a really interesting world. It's very different from many of the fantasy books that I've read, so it just was something new and exciting, and I just loved all the characters, and it's just awesome, and I don't think enough people read it. So read Legends of Mirwood because it's awesome. We are supposed to recommend a book that we want people to read ASAP, like before the end of this year. And to tell you the truth, I didn't really know what to recommend for this. So I decided, because I don't feel like I recommend enough comics in these monthly recommendation videos, that I would recommend a lesser known maybe comic and recommend The Dreamer. This is the story of a teenage girl, and she falls asleep and realizes that when she dreams, she's actually going back in time to the Revolutionary War times, and different things are set off because she's back in time. She's learning new things about this, and there's also a little bit of a romance going on when she goes there, and so she keeps dreaming, and she's not sure if this is a real experience, like she's really going back in time, or if this is just something in her imagination. This is a web comic, so I will link you in the description if you want to check out the comic on the web. But you can also get the first act, because the story is coming out in different acts, and you can get the first act in 3 volumes of trade paperback. I love the time travel element. I really love the main character, whose name I'm blanking on, but she's pretty cool because she's a musical theater junkie like me, so that's kind of awesome. And I also think if you're somebody that's maybe like a Hamilton fan, you'll probably enjoy this as well. Then we're supposed to recommend a fantasy book. I'm going to pick Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman, which is one of my favorite books, and it is about a guy named Richard Mayhew that's just this really sweet, good-hearted dude, and he sees this girl bleeding in the street named Dor, and he decides to help her, not knowing that by helping this girl, he is causing his life to go into complete shambles, because there are people that fall through the cracks of London, and there is a total underground city under London that is fantasy-esque and crazy, and this girl Dor is being chased by these really nasty guys, and there is a reason why they need Dor that is not yet revealed, but they killed her old family to get to her, and yeah, poor Richard, and he has a few very bad days. I hope I did that summary justice. This is just, oh, I love this book. It's just brilliant. Definitely check this out if you want an urban fantasy sort of story, but I think high fantasy people will like this as well because it's got a nice mix of both. I have a book that has little to no romance in it, and I decided to go with The Silence of the Lambs by Thomas Harris. If you've seen this movie, you basically know what it's about, but it is about Clarice Starling. She is in the FBI. She's kind of an up-and-coming profiler. Her boss decides to send her to interview a man named Hannibal Lecter, and she's supposed to interview this serial killer, Hannibal Lecter, so that he can help her catch another serial killer that they're after, that they've entitled Buffalo Bill. Yeah, there's definitely not much time for romance of any kind in this book because they're hunting a serial killer and it's kind of dire. I really love love Thomas Harris's writing. I think he has really interesting ways of stating imagery and just making everything really cool, and I just love his writing style. And so that's why I decided to recommend this book. And if you feel like it, you can also read his book Red Dragon before reading this. This is not necessarily a sequel. I think it stands alone really well, but there are some like additional facts in Red Dragon that you might find fun to know before reading this, but you don't have to read Red Dragon before this. You can totally read them separately as standalones, and it works just fine. Now we're supposed to recommend my favorite type of book, which is the standalone book. I decided to recommend Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell. And again, if you've seen the movie, you kind of know what Gone with the Wind is about, but I'll summarize it anyway. It's about a girl named Scarlett O'Hara. The book starts when she's, I think, about 16. And when she's 16, the Civil War breaks out, and it's basically just her story of, first of all, going through the Civil War in the South as a Southerner, what that experience was kind of like for her, and then everything that sort of happens to her after the war ends. So that's why this book is a chunker, but I tell you, every page is worth it. Kind of interesting to see what a Southerner's view of the Civil War is, especially if you live in the South like me. It's very idealistic. You're like, I don't really think it was like that, Margaret, but it's interesting to see what she thinks about the whole viewpoint. And I also just really love how well developed the characters are. Definitely the characters are not the most likable people. Scarlett and Rhett and Ashley definitely have their flaws. Even Melanie is like too nice, and that could maybe be considered a flaw, you know. But there is a lovely love square between all four of them, and that is very entertaining as well. And also, I just ship Rhett and Scarlett so hard. Yeah, I want it to happen in my mind. Maybe in a book that's better than some of the official sequels to this book that are written by other authors. Then we have a survival story. Now I had to go and look up what actually constituted as a survival story, and when I looked it up, I was like, I have read none of these books, but I noticed that a lot of books that they mentioned on a survival story list did have something to do with the Titanic, so I thought I would recommend a fictional book that is about the Titanic. It's maybe not my favorite survival story, but it is definitely like a good, solid 4-star book, and it is The Watch That Ends the Night by Alan Wolfe. Now, this is a book written in poetic verse. It takes the point of view of several people on the Titanic, most of which were actually people that were on board the Titanic when it sank. I thought it was very interesting how this book managed to not be really depressing, and I think it's because there are a lot of people that he featured in here that did actually survive the experience, and then it kind of also has a little bit of a biography in the back of the book about those people and, you know, what they did after the Titanic sank. So I think all of that in a historical context is really interesting, and it is different because it's written in poetic verse. Next, we pick a book that features friendship. One of my favorite books that features friendship is The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. The Secret Garden is about a young girl named Mary. She lived in India most of her life, but her parents pass away and she has to move to England to live with her very mysterious uncle. Through moving to England, she meets a young boy named Dickon, who is the brother of one of the servants that works in the house, and she also meets her cousin Colin, who is very ill, and the three of them form this really interesting friendship that is just so great, and I love seeing all those characters interact with each other, but I also love seeing how friendship really does change the lives of Colin and Mary. And that's why I have picked this fabulous classic story. Then we pick a book that takes place outside of the US or features travel. I kind of forgot to recommend this book when we did this theme. I decided to recommend Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, and it takes place in England, in Cornwall. It is about a woman who, through a variety of interesting circumstances, ends up marrying this man that she barely knows, and he's rather wealthy, and he lives in this big hoopla sort of house, and she finds out that he was married before to this woman named Rebecca, and that there is something weird going on with that past marriage and the death of Rebecca, but she doesn't really want to ask, and yeah, insanity sort of ensues because she feels like she can't get away from the shadow of this woman that she never met that died. It's just a really exciting, interesting book that's very psychological, and I love that. And also watch the Hitchcock film because that movie is the bomb. It's probably one of my favorite Hitchcock films. Book and movie, check them out. Lastly, we recommend our favorite book with an empowering female. The book that I want to recommend for my favorite empowering female book is no longer in print, but I'm still gonna go ahead and recommend Winter of Fire by Cheryl Jordan. You might find it, so I'm gonna recommend it anyway. Winter of Fire is a fantasy novel. It is set in sort of this barren world where it is always cold. So coal mining becomes very important, and there are two classes of people. There are the Quelled, who are the people that go into the mines and mine the coal, and there are also the very wealthy types that just, reap the benefits of that. Also, there is a Fire Lord, who is the person that's sort of got this gift to divine where the coal is, and so that is a very prestigious, important job. So the main character in this book, Elsha, she is one of the Quelled. She's one of that lower class of people, and she kind of discovers that she might have a Fire Lord's gift. And because of this, she kind of ends up serving under the current Fire Lord, and just a lot of fun adventure and just emotionalness happens, and it's a beautiful story that I love so much. It's definitely one of my favorite books. I love Elsha. She is such a strong character, but I will say that if you can't find this book and you want to read a book with a strong, empowering female, feel free to just refer back to the Legends of Mirrorwood series and read that series. Woo! So those were all my recommendations for the month. I hope you guys enjoyed this. It was really hard for me just to pick one book for these, but I think I did a decent job at it. I will see you next week with another video, and thank you all for watching and subscribing because you're awesome. Bye, sweet peas!